At her own wedding, in front of hundreds of guests, a bride humiliated a black waitress, mocked her, insulted her, and made her clean the floor in front of everyone. But what she didn't know was that the woman she was shaming wasn't just any waitress. She was the groom's sister in disguise. And when the truth came out, the entire room froze, and the bride's world came crashing down. The sun dipped low behind the silver towers of downtown Atlanta, casting warm gold over the sprawling lawns of Hillcrest Garden Estate. It was the kind of evening that belonged in a magazine. The perfect weather, the perfect decor, most of all the perfect couple, at least. That's what the guests thought. Inside the glass-walled banquet hall, chandeliers shimmered like frozen rain. Tables were draped in ivory silk, and laughter floated through the air like the scent of roses. Near the back, a young black waitress named Amara Johnson adjusted the tray in her hands. Her posture, graceful but her eyes watchful. She wasn't there to serve wine, at least not just for that reason. Amara had a secret. She scanned the crowd, her heart quietly pounding. Her brother, Ethan Walker, the groom, hadn't arrived yet. But she knew when he walked in, it would take everything in her not to call his name out loud. Months of planning had led to this moment. The plan was simple but dangerous. Amara would pose as one of the catering staff to see if Ethan's fiancée, Charlotte Pierce, was truly the woman she claimed to be. Ethan wanted to know if his bride's heart was pure. She could see people beyond their skin or status. Amara didn't like the plan, but she understood it. She had seen what judgment and pride could do to people, and something about Charlotte's perfect, polished smile in photos had always looked hollow. "Table 4 needs a refill," said Jasmine, another waitress, breaking Amara's thoughts. Jasmine was friendly, bright-eyed, and had no idea who Amara really was. "Got it," Amara replied softly, forcing a smile. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured champagne into a glass. All around her, guests in glittering gowns chattered about business, travel, and charity balls. No one looked at her twice. She was invisible, and that was exactly what she needed to be. But her invisibility didn't last long. Charlotte Pierce swept into the hall like royalty in a cloud of silk and diamonds. The crowd gasped and clapped. Her blonde curls shimmered under the light, and her smile seemed carved from perfection. "Welcome, everyone," she said, raising her arms dramatically. "Let's make tonight unforgettable." Her gaze drifted across the hall and stopped on Amara. For a moment their eyes met, and Charlotte's smile faltered ever so. Slightly, her lips curved into a cold smirk. "Some people really let anyone work at weddings these days," she whispered to her bridesmaid. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough for Amara to hear. Amara's chest tightened. She looked away quickly, pretending not to notice, though she could feel Charlotte's eyes burning into her back. The music swelled, guests clinked glasses, and the celebration carried on. But Amara's heart had already begun to sink. Something told her this night would be unforgettable indeed, but not for the reasons Charlotte imagined. As Amara turns to serve another table, a guest accidentally bumps into her, spilling red wine across the floor and Charlotte's white designer shoes. Gasps ripple through the room as the bride freezes mid-laugh, her eyes turning icy cold. For a heartbeat, time froze. The laughter, the music, even the soft clinking of champagne glasses, all of it vanished into silence. Every pair of eyes in the grand hall turned toward the red stain, spreading like wildfire, across Charlotte's flawless white heels. Charlotte blinked down at them, her face tightening. Her manicured fingers twitched as if itching to strike. "What?" she said through gritted teeth. "Did you just do?" Amara dropped to her knees instantly. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." "It was an accident," she said, her voice calm but trembling at the edges. She grabbed a napkin and began to blot the wine, but the carpet absorbed the color, like it was feeding on her embarrassment. Charlotte's friends giggled behind their hands. "Maybe she's never seen a white wedding before," one bridesmaid sneered. The bride's laugh followed a low, cruel sound. "Oh, don't bother, sweetheart," she said, stepping back as if Amara's touch might infect her dress. "Just watch where you're going next time. You people really don't have coordination, do you?" Her words stung harder than the wine's sharp scent. The guests shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to hear. A few men cleared their throats. One woman whispered that was uncalled for, but no one said it aloud. Charlotte smiled sweetly again, as if the insult had never happened. Amara kept her composure. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but her face remained still, graceful, quiet, unbroken. She finished cleaning, stood up straight, and said softly, "It won't happen again, Mom." Charlotte tilted her head, clearly irritated that Amara hadn't snapped back. "Oh, I'm sure it won't," she said, her tone sugary and dangerous. "Because if it does, I'll have you sent home. I don't like seeing clumsy staff around my guests." Then, with a perfect smile plastered across her face, she turned to her bridesmaids. "Come on, girls. Let's go take more photos before my shoes completely ruin my mood." They swept away in laughter and perfume. Jasmine hurried over, worry in her eyes. "Girl, are you okay?" Amara forced a small smile. "I'm fine. Some people just show who they are without realizing it." Jasmine looked at her curiously. "You sound like someone who's seen this before." "I have," Amara replied, eyes following Charlotte's retreating figure. "And I've learned something important. Truth always comes to light." Her words carried quiet power. She lifted her tray again, ignoring the stares, and continued working. But inside, something stirred, an ache mixed with determination. Across the room, Mr. Dalton, Ethan's business partner, had watched everything, his brow furrowed. He leaned toward another guest, who trained their staff. That woman handled herself like a diplomat, not a waitress. Meanwhile, Charlotte posed for photos, oblivious to the fact that her cruel remark had already started to spread among the guests. A few whispered, a few frowned. Even before the wedding vows, cracks had begun to form in the image she worked so hard to maintain. And as the soft thunder rolled outside, Amara whispered under her breath, "I hope Ethan knows what he's marrying." Just then, a commotion near the entrance draws everyone's attention. Someone important has arrived late. The guests murmur as the doors open wide, revealing the groom himself, Ethan Walker, finally stepping into the hall. As soon as Ethan Walker entered the grand hall, a hush swept through the guests. Heads turned and smiles rippled across the room like waves. The groom was finally here. His tall frame carried confidence, his tailored black suit gleaming under the chandelier light. But as he scanned the crowd, his eyes softened the moment they landed on one person. For a second, his breath caught. She stood quietly near the dessert table, pretending to arrange glasses. Her head slightly bowed. Ethan's chest tightened with both pride and pain. His sister looked so composed, so strong, yet he could see the faint shadow of hurt behind her calm expression. He clenched his jaw, reminding himself that tonight he had to stay in character. If Charlotte truly loved him, she needed to pass this final test. Charlotte, on the other hand, lit up like a spotlight had hit her. She rushed toward Ethan with a dramatic gasp. "Baby, you're late," she cried, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "We've been waiting forever." Ethan smiled politely, brushing a kiss on her cheek. I know. Got caught in traffic, everything looks beautiful." Charlotte's laughter returned instantly. "Of course it does. I planned it." She tossed her hair and looped her arm through his, but her eyes darted to Amara. Her smile faded for just a heartbeat. "Although I can't say the staff are quite up to standard." Ethan followed her gaze briefly, then looked back at her, his tone neutral. "They seem fine to me." Charlotte giggled nervously, brushing it off. "You're just too kind." But her bridesmaids weren't done. Near the floral arch, Lydia, Charlotte's closest friend, leaned in to whisper to another bridesmaid, loud enough for Amara to overhear. "Can you believe they let her serve here? She looks like she walked straight out of a subway station." The other girl laughed. "I know. And that wig, oh my God, it's tragic." Amara froze for a moment, her hand tightening around a tray. She wanted to walk away, to let it roll off her back, but something inside her stirred, not anger, just sadness. The kind that came from knowing people still looked at skin before soul. Jasmine nudged her gently. "Ignore them, they're just noise." Amara nodded, her voice quiet. "I know who I am. That's enough. Her calm unsettled them even more. Lydia sneered. She's probably used to cleaning up after people like us. The bride's mother, Mistress Pierce, joined the group, sipping champagne. Well, some people just belong in certain roles, don't they? That comment made a few guests nearby exchange uncomfortable glances. Mr. Dalton, sitting at a nearby table, frowned deeply. He whispered to another man, "If this is how they treat the staff, I can only imagine what happens behind closed doors." Meanwhile, Ethan caught fragments of the whispering. His jaw tightened again, but he stayed silent for now. He needed Charlotte to reveal her true nature fully before he intervened. As the band began playing soft jazz, Charlotte turned to her bridesmaids. "Come on, let's make a toast. Tonight's about joy, not distractions." They laughed again, but the sound felt hollow. Amara stepped back toward the kitchen, her heart aching but steady. She didn't want revenge. She only wanted truth. And deep down she felt that truth was coming sooner than anyone expected. As Amara pushes through the kitchen door to catch her breath, a voice stops her cold. It's Ethan standing there alone, his expression serious and unreadable. "Amara," he says quietly, "we need to talk." The kitchen smelled of vanilla, butter, and roasted herbs, the kind of warmth that usually calms the heart. But not tonight. The door swung shut behind Amara as she found herself face to face with Ethan. He stood by the counter, his tie slightly loosened, his expression caught between guilt and affection. For a moment the two just looked at each other, brother and sister reunited under the strangest disguise. Amara set her tray down, her voice low but firm. "You saw what happened out there, didn't you?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "I did, and it's worse than I imagined." "Then why are we still doing this?" Amara demanded softly. "You said you wanted to test her heart." "But Ethan, how much more do you need to see?" He leaned against the counter, rubbing his temples. "I needed to be sure, Amara. You know how many people told me Charlotte was just after my money. I didn't want to believe them." His eyes darkened. "But I had to know if she would respect people who can't do anything for her. People like us before everything changed." That made Amara fall silent because deep down she understood. Her thoughts drifted backward to the moment everything changed between them. Years earlier, Atlanta foster care home. Amara was 12 when Ethan was adopted. They'd clung to each other as children, sharing torn blankets and whispered dreams of finding their mother again. A Wilty couple had chosen Ethan, not her. The day he left, he promised, "I'll find you again, I swear it." And he did. It took him nearly 15 years, a private investigator, and one old photograph to track her down. When they finally met again 2 months ago, she barely recognized him. Polished, confident, and successful, but his hug still felt like home. He'd told her everything about his upcoming marriage to Charlotte, about his doubts, about how he wanted Amara to attend the wedding, undercover to test his fiancé's kindness. Amara had hesitated. "You want me to pretend to be staff?" Ethan had nodded. "I don't care how beautiful she looks in photos, Amara. If she can't treat a stranger with respect, then she doesn't deserve to wear my ring." Back in the present, Amara sighed. "Ethan, you've seen enough. She humiliated me in front of everyone twice." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I know, but she's about to reveal her real self completely. Give it a little longer." Amara's eyes softened, filled with pain and pride. "You've changed, brother. You're stronger, but it's breaking you." He managed a small smile. "Sometimes truth has to break something before it sets you free." There was a brief silence. Only the faint music from the hall filtered through. Then Ethan added quietly, "Stay till the vows. After that, I'll handle everything." Amara nodded reluctantly. "All right, but if she hurts one more person tonight—" Ethan raised his hand gently. "Then the truth will speak louder than anything she can say." They shared a small, bittersweet smile, two survivors bound by blood, about to face a storm together. Just then, a catering staffer burst into the kitchen. "They're calling for the groom, sir. You're needed outside for the toast." Ethan glanced toward the door, then back at his sister. "Stay strong, Amara. The night's just getting started." He walked out, straightening his suit, his face calm but his heart heavy. Amara leaned against the counter, staring after him in her gut. She knew he was right. The night wasn't over, and neither was the test. From the kitchen doorway, Mistress Pierce, Charlotte's mother, stood watching, having overheard just enough of their conversation to know something wasn't right. Her eyes narrowed dangerously as she whispered, "So the waitress isn't who she seems." The chandeliers shimmered above the reception hall as laughter returned to full volume, glasses clinking and music pulsing with celebration. But behind the glow of champagne and smiles, the air carried a quiet tension, one that Mistress Pierce had already begun to feed. She stood by the dessert table, her pearls gleaming like polished armor, eyes locked on Amara, who carried a tray of sparkling cider through the crowd. Her lips curved into a small, sharp smile. "So," Mistress Pierce murmured to Lydia, "the chief bridesmaid, our little waitress, isn't quite who she says she is." Lydia blinked, pretending surprise. "What do you mean, Mistress Pierce?" "Oh, nothing," Mistress Pierce said with a sly tilt of her head. "Let's just say I overheard something interesting." She sipped her wine slowly, savoring the power in her words. "But no one likes a scandal before vows, right?" Lydia chuckled nervously. "Of course not." Mistress Pierce's eyes narrowed toward Amara again. "Still, it's unsettling. She's far too composed. Doesn't flinch when Charlotte scolds her. Doesn't gossip, carries herself like someone who thinks she's above her station." "She's polite," Lydia offered. "Polite?" Mistress Pierce scoffed. "That's not politeness, dear. That's pride, pretending to be humility. I can smell it." As she spoke, Amara made her way to their table. "Excuse me," she said softly, setting a glass down. "Would you like me to bring another round?" Mistress Pierce's gaze was sharp as glass. "You seem rather confident for someone serving drinks, don't you?" Amara froze for half a beat, then smiled gently. "Confidence isn't against the rules, ma'am." Lydia stifled a laugh, earning a disapproving glance from the older woman. "Careful, dear," Mistress Pierce said, turning back to Amara. "You should know your place. People remember the way staff behave at high society events like this." Amara's heart tightened, but she kept her tone calm. "And people also remember the way they're treated, ma'am." Mistress Pierce blinked, momentarily thrown off by the quiet strength in Amara's voice. Before she could respond, a burst of laughter erupted near the stage as Charlotte grabbed the microphone. "Everyone," the bride called, "let's give a toast to my wonderful guests, to all the hard-working people behind the scenes tonight." Applause filled the air. For a moment, Amara thought maybe, just maybe, Charlotte would show some grace. But then came the sting. Charlotte smiled sweetly and added, "Especially to those who've come a long way just to pour our drinks. Let's hope they find better opportunities soon." The laughter that followed was uneven, half-forced, half-shocked. Amara's eyes flicked toward Ethan, who stood at the far side of the room, his face unreadable. She could see his hand tighten around his glass, the muscles in his jaw pulsing, but he didn't move. "Not yet." Mistress Pierce leaned closer and whispered coldly, "She's right, dear. Sometimes life puts people where they belong." Amara turned to face her fully, meeting her gaze without fear. "And sometimes, Mum, life reminds people where they came from." Mistress Pierce's smile faltered. The soft clinking of forks on plates couldn't mask the sudden chill between them. Guests nearby exchanged glances, feeling the tension like electricity in the air. Amara stepped away, her hands trembling slightly. Jasmine caught her arm near the hallway. "Are you okay?" Amara nodded, voice low. "I will be, but something tells me this night's not done teaching lessons." As Amara walks toward the kitchen, she passes the grand entryway and freezes. Standing there, watching her quietly with conflicted eyes, is Ethan, and beside him, Charlotte, who suddenly whispers, "Why do you keep looking at that waitress, Ethan?" Ethan could feel Charlotte's gaze drilling into him before she even spoke. Her voice came low and sharp, slicing through the noise of the room like a hidden blade. "Why do you keep looking at that waitress?" she whispered, forcing a smile for the guests watching nearby. He blinked, pulling his attention away from Amara and back to his fiancée. "What are you talking about?" Charlotte's perfect lips twitched into a smirk. Don't play dumb, Ethan. I've seen you glancing her way since you walked in. Don't tell me you've got a thing for the help. Her words were wrapped in fake laughter, but underneath it, jealousy pulsed, dark and raw. Ethan inhaled slowly, forcing composure. Charlotte, this isn't the time or the place. Oh, I think it's exactly the place, she said under her breath, still smiling brightly as a photographer passed by. You're about to marry me, and I won't have rumors about you eyeing some. She stopped herself. But Ethan saw it in her eyes, the word she almost said. His stomach turned. Somewhat, Charlotte. She shrugged delicately. You know what I mean. It's just strange she doesn't act like the others. She's too sure of herself, too comfortable. Ethan's tone hardened. Maybe she's comfortable because she's good at her job, or maybe she just knows how to carry herself with dignity, something you could learn from. Charlotte blinked, her smile freezing in place. Around them guests mingled, completely unaware of the tension simmering beneath their polite chatter. She leaned closer, whispering, "Careful, darling. You're starting to sound like you're defending her." Ethan's gaze drifted past her, back to Amara, who was quietly refilling a guest's drink near the window. There was grace in every movement she made, humility without submission. It reminded him of the little sister who used to make daisy crowns behind the orphanage, dreaming of a better world. He couldn't tell Charlotte the truth yet, not here, not while everyone watched. So he simply smiled and said, "Maybe I'm just noticing what real class looks like." Charlotte's breath hitched, her smile finally cracked. But before she could reply, Mr. Dalton appeared beside them, his jovial voice cutting through the moment. "Ah, there you are, Ethan. Everyone's been waiting for your toast, son." Ethan forced a friendly grin. "Of course, Mr. Dalton, let's not keep them waiting." He turned back to Charlotte. "We'll talk later." He stepped onto the small stage microphone in hand. The lights reflected off his wedding ring, still gleaming and untouched by truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice calm but firm, "thank you for being here tonight. I'm honored to be surrounded by friends, family," and his gaze flicked to Amara for half a second. "Those who remind us what respect and kindness truly mean." Charlotte's eyes widened. Mistress Pierce frowned. A few guests glanced around, confused. Ethan smiled, raising his glass. "To love and to seeing people not for their titles but for their hearts." Applause followed, though awkwardly. Charlotte's hand tightened around her glass. Hard-haired diamond rings scraped against it. When the clapping died down, Charlotte leaned to Lydia and whispered, "He's making me look like a fool." Lydia gave a weak laugh. "Relax, everyone loves a poetic toast." But Charlotte wasn't listening. Her pride had been scratched, and deep inside, something ugly began to stir. Amara, meanwhile, quietly slipped back into the kitchen, her heart aching. She could feel the walls of this beautiful hall closing in with secrets. Just as Amara sets down her tray, the head chef rushes in, panicked. "One of the guests wants you now." "The bride herself," she says. "If you don't come this instant, she'll have you fired." The kitchen fell silent when the chef spoke. Every staff member turned toward Amara, their expressions uneasy. Even Jasmine whispered, "Oh no, what did she do this time?" Amara took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and wiped her palms on her apron. "It's fine," she said quietly, though her heart raced. "Let's see what the lady of the hour wants." She walked out slowly, her tray balanced perfectly in her hands. The laughter and music of the wedding grew louder with every step, but as she entered the main hall again, the noise seemed to fade, replaced by a strange, tense energy. Charlotte stood in the center of the room, holding a microphone, her arm linked with Ethan's. The bride's flawless smile looked like glass, shiny, fragile, and dangerous. "There she is," Charlotte said dramatically as Amara approached. "Everyone, let's give a round of applause for our hard-working waitress tonight." A few guests clapped awkwardly, most just exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan frowned. "Charlotte, what are you doing?" he muttered, but she waved him off. "Oh, darling, don't worry," she said sweetly into the mic. "I just think we should take a moment to appreciate service. After all, not everyone gets to attend a wedding like this, right?" Her bridesmaids snickered. Lydia whispered something and they both laughed. Amara froze mid-step, the tray trembling slightly in her hand. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Some curious, some embarrassed, some pitying. Charlotte continued, her tone dripping with condescension. You know, I've always believed kindness is about giving everyone a chance, even those who might not quite fit the scene. That line earned nervous chuckles from a few guests. Ethan's voice cut through the tension. Charlotte, enough. She turned toward him, her face still plastered with that perfect smile. Relax, honey. I'm just having fun. She faced the crowd again. Now I'd like to propose a toast to hard work, to knowing your place in life, and to always striving to rise above where you came from. Her words landed like daggers. Amara's chest tightened, but she refused to let a single tear fall. Instead, she took a small step forward and said quietly, "Would you like me to pour your drink, ma'am?" Her voice was calm, controlled, the kind that could silence chaos. Charlotte blinked, taken aback. "Oh, sure," she said, holding out her glass. Amara gently poured the champagne, her hand steady. But when she finished, she looked up and said softly, "It's good to toast kindness, ma'am, but real kindness doesn't embarrass others." A hush fell over the crowd. The band stopped playing. Charlotte's jaw tightened. "Excuse me." Amara bowed her head slightly. "You heard me. I meant no disrespect. I just think it's important we mean what we say." A murmur swept through the guests. Someone even whispered, "She's right." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. Pride surged within him, mixed with sorrow. This was his sister, the bravest soul he knew. Charlotte's face flushed red. "You're fired," she hissed. "Get out before I call security." Amara nodded calmly and began to turn away. But before she could take another step, Jasmine rushed out from the back, shouting, "You can't do that. She didn't do anything wrong." All eyes swung to Jasmine. The young waitress stood, trembling but defiant. "You've been insulting her all night, and now you want to humiliate her again. That's not how decent people act." The crowd erupted in whispers. Mr. Dalton stood up, his voice steady. "The young lady's right." Charlotte's mask cracked. "Oh, for heaven's sake, this is ridiculous." But Ethan's voice cut through, low and cold enough, Charlotte. The microphone in her hand suddenly felt heavy. Ethan stepped forward slowly, his eyes blazing with restrained anger. "You've made your point now. It's my turn." As Ethan reaches for the microphone, the lights flicker and thunder rumbles outside. The storm is coming, not just in the sky, but in the truth he's about to unleash. Thunder rolled across the night sky, its echo vibrating through the glass walls of the Hillcrest Garden ballroom. Guests exchanged uneasy glances as the flickering lights gave the room a moody, electric glow. Somewhere between fear and curiosity, everyone felt it. Something big was about to happen. Amara stood near the back now, her tray lowered, her composure tested but not broken. Charlotte still held the microphone, her knuckles white around it, her eyes darting nervously toward Ethan, who now stepped closer, his face unreadable. "Charlotte," he said, his tone calm but firm, "you've said enough for tonight." But Charlotte wasn't ready to back down. Her pride was louder than reason. "No, Ethan, I think I should finish. Everyone needs to know how unprofessional your staff are." She turned to the crowd again, voice rising. "Imagine she talks back to me in front of all our guests. People these days have no respect for boundaries. This is exactly why." She didn't get to finish. Jasmine, the young waitress with braids tucked under a black cap, suddenly stepped forward. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every word. "Stop it," she said. Charlotte blinked, confused. "Excuse me." "Stop talking to her like that," Jasmine repeated, her voice echoing through the silent hall. "You've been belittling her all night, and everyone here knows it. What did she even do to you? Spill a drink, people make mistakes." The guests gasped. Charlotte's face hardened. "You're way out of line." "No," Jasmine interrupted, her voice cracking with emotion. "You're out of line. You don't treat people like they're beneath you because they're serving food or cleaning tables. You don't get to humiliate someone and then call it a joke. The entire hall fell silent. The only sound was the rain beginning to tap against the glass windows. Ethan stared at Jasmine, admiration flickering in his eyes. He knew courage when he saw it. And tonight, this young woman had more courage than most people in that room. Charlotte laughed nervously, trying to regain control. "Oh, please, you're all being dramatic. It was just a little fun. People need to learn to take a joke." Mr. Dalton stood up, then his deep voice cutting through the tension. "No, mistress. Pierce's daughter," he said firmly. "That wasn't a joke. What you did was cruel. And the way you've spoken to this young lady all night is shameful." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the guests. A few nodded, others looked down, uncomfortable. Mistress Pierce, seated near the front, tried to intervene. "Everyone, please, let's not blow this out of proportion." But Jasmine turned toward her. "With all due respect, ma'am, your daughter's been blowing it out of proportion since the night began." Ethan stepped forward now, placing a hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "Thank you," he said softly. "You've said what needed to be said." Jasmine nodded, stepping back, her heart racing but her eyes proud. Charlotte, realizing she was losing control of the crowd, snapped, "Fine. You all want to defend the help? Go ahead, let's see how far that gets you." Ethan's voice was low and dangerous. "You should really stop talking, Charlotte." Her head whipped toward him. "Why, are you embarrassed that your guests are siding with a waitress instead of your bride?" He stared at her, the pain in his eyes deep and quiet, embarrassed. "No, I'm just starting to see you for who you really are." That struck a nerve. Charlotte's smile faltered, and for the first time, fear flashed in her eyes. Then, from the corner of the room, lightning flashed through the windows, a blinding streak that lighted every face in the hall. When it faded, Amara was gone from the main floor. Ethan's eyes darted around the crowd, searching. A waiter whispered urgently to him, "Sir, she went out back. She said she couldn't stay any longer." Ethan's heart dropped. He handed the microphone back to Mr. Dalton and stormed toward the exit, rain beginning to pour outside. He whispered under his breath, "Not tonight, Amara. Please don't go." Rain poured in silver sheets over the grand gardens of Hillcrest Estate. The fairy lights that once shimmered like stars now flickered weakly against the storm. Ethan pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped into the downpour, his polished shoes splashing into puddles. He scanned the open terrace, and there she was. Amara, standing alone beneath the marble canopy, her uniform drenched, her hands clasped tightly around herself. The raindrops rolled down her cheeks, but her eyes were dry, strong, steady. "Amara," Ethan called, his voice cutting through the thunder. She turned, startled. "Ethan, what are you doing out here? You'll ruin your suit." He shook his head, stepping closer. "I don't care about the suit." The storm swirled around them, the kind of rain that seemed to wash away everything false. Ethan stopped just in front of her, his heart heavy. "You shouldn't have had to go through that," he said, voice thick with regret. "This was supposed to be a test, not torture." Amara looked away, her voice soft. "I told you from the start, Ethan, you didn't need to test her. You can't fake compassion. You either have it or you don't." He sighed, running a hand through his soaked hair. "I know, but I needed to see it for myself, to be absolutely sure before I married her." "And now?" Amara asked quietly, meeting his gaze. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Now I'm sure, just not in the way I hoped." A flash of lightning lit their faces. Brother and sister finally standing, as one after years apart. The storm made their silhouettes glow like defiance against the night. "I wanted her to see people the way I do," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. "To see you the way I do. But she never even looked beyond your skin or your uniform." Amara shook her head sadly. "People like her don't look, they stare." For a moment neither of them spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. Then Amara took a deep breath. "Ethan, listen to me. You don't have to expose anything. You can walk away quietly, call off the wedding tomorrow. Andy, move on." He stared at her. "And let her humiliate people like you again. No, Amara. She needs to face what she's done. Everyone here needs to see what kind of woman she really is. Amara sighed, knowing that once Ethan made up his mind, there was no stopping him. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't lose your peace, trying to prove someone else's ugliness, she whispered. You've already won by not becoming like her. Ethan's eyes softened, pride and sorrow mixing in them. You sound just like Mom. Amara smiled faintly. She taught us well, didn't she? Even when life didn't. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. Stay near the back. I'm about to end this charade once and for all. Amara's breath caught Ethan. What are you going to do? He gave a faint, determined smile. Tell the truth. As he turned to go, Amara called out over the rain. Be ready for what comes after. He paused, his back to her. I've been ready my whole life. The music from inside swelled again as he pushed open the doors, stepping back into the golden glow of the ballroom, leaving behind the storm, only to bring another one inside. As Ethan walks toward the stage, the guests quiet down, sensing tension in the air. Charlotte, standing near the center, forces a bright laugh and whispers to Lydia, Why's he looking at me like that? The thunder outside cracks loudly, as if the sky itself is warning her. The ballroom's golden glow trembled beneath the lightning flashing beyond the glass walls. The once cheerful chatter had dimmed to a low murmur, a hush born of unease. Even the string quartet hesitated mid-song as Ethan strode across the polished floor, water dripping from his hair onto his black suit. Every head turned. The storm outside roared, but the storm inside was just beginning. Charlotte forced a laugh, though her voice wavered. Darling, you look like you wrestled the weather itself. Where on earth did you go? Ethan didn't answer. He climbed the steps to the small stage and took the microphone from the startled DJ. Everyone, he said, his voice calm but edged with thunder. Can I have your attention for a moment? The guests fell silent. The only sound was the steady hum of rain against glass. Charlotte tilted her head, her smile stretching tight. Ethan, sweetheart, maybe we should save the speeches for later. He held up a hand. This won't take long. His eyes swept over the crowd, friends, business partners, church elders, people who thought they knew him, who thought they knew her. He could feel their curiosity like heat. Tonight, he began slowly, was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. But happiness built on lies doesn't last. A few guests gasped softly. Charlotte blinked, still clinging to her smile. What are you talking about? She asked with a brittle laugh. Ethan ignored her. I want to talk about what love really looks like, because it's not flowers or fancy halls or designer dresses. It's respect, it's kindness. He glanced toward the corner. Where? Amara stood half-hidden behind a column, her wet hair gleaming under the lights. It's treating everyone with dignity, even when no one's watching. The murmurs grew louder. People exchanged looks. Mistress Pierce shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Charlotte tried to grab his arm, whispering sharply, You're embarrassing us. He turned to her, eyes steady. No, Charlotte, you embarrassed us. Her face went pale. Excuse me. You humiliated a woman who did nothing to you, Ethan said, voice rising now, full of restrained fury. You mocked her for her skin, her job, her worth. You treated her like dirt because you thought no one important was watching. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a fork. Charlotte stammered Ethan. She's just a waitress. Why are you defending her like this? That sentence echoed through the hall like a curse. The thunder outside boomed in response. Ethan's voice dropped, calm but cutting. Because that waitress is my sister. The entire room froze. Charlotte's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lydia's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Mistress Pierce stood up, her hand flying to her chest. What? Charlotte finally breathed, her voice trembling. Ethan's gaze hardened. Amara Johnson, my biological sister. We grew up together in foster care. We were separated for almost 20 years, and I just found her again. I asked her to be here tonight, not to serve drinks, but to see the truth for herself, to see who I was marrying. Gasps turned into whispers, then into a roar of disbelief. Charlotte took a step back, her face crumbling. You set me up." "I didn't set you up," Ethan said quietly. "You set yourself up the moment you opened your mouth." The air grew thick, electric outside. The storm hammered harder, lightning flashing white across Charlotte's tear-streaked face. She turned wildly toward the guests. "He's lying. This is insane. Why would he?" But she stopped when she saw Amara step forward from the shadows, calm and graceful, hairy uniform soaked, but her head held high. The sight of her silence spoke louder than any denial Charlotte could offer. The ballroom hung on the edge of silence, that fragile kind of silence that comes right before something shatters. Charlotte's chest rose and fell quickly, her mascara smudged from the tears. She tried to blink away. "This is a joke," she finally said, her voice cracking. "Some kind of cruel prank. You expect me to believe that she is your sister." Ethan didn't flinch. "Believe it or not, it's the truth." Charlotte gave a shaky laugh, clutching her diamond necklace like it might hold her dignity together. "A waitress, your sister, Ethan, stop this nonsense. You come from a good family." He cut her off coldly. "I didn't grow up with a good family, Charlotte. I grew up in foster care, remember? You knew that. You just didn't know that the sister I lost was standing right in front of you tonight. The woman you've been humiliating since the moment you saw her." Gasps rippled through the guests again. The sound of rain outside grew louder, like applause for the truth finally being spoken. Mistress Pierce stood abruptly. "Ethan, that's enough. You can't ruin my daughter's wedding over some emotional—" "Sit down, Mistress Pierce," Ethan said quietly, his tone calm but commanding. The crowd murmured. Even the DJ froze behind the booth. Charlotte's lips trembled. "So what? You had her pretend to be staff. You tricked me." "No," Ethan replied. "I gave you a chance to show who you are." Charlotte stared at him, her expression morphing from disbelief to fury. "You set me up. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." He met her eyes steadily. "You embarrassed yourself." That sentence struck her like a slap. Her pride, the one thing she loved more than Ethan, cracked. "You think you're better than me because of her," she spat, her voice rising with hysteria. "You think she belongs in this crowd. Look at her, Ethan. She doesn't fit here. She's—" The next word died in her throat. The crowd collectively inhaled, sensing the vile word forming on her tongue. "Say it," Ethan said, his voice like iron. "Go on, finish it." Charlotte froze, her lips quivered. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," he said. "You've meant every insult since the moment you saw her skin." The silence that followed was unbearable. People shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting away, pretending not to see the ugliness that had been exposed. Mr. Dalton finally stood, his deep voice carrying across the hall. "Son, you did the right thing, bringing truth to light. This world needs more people brave enough to expose cruelty, especially when it hides behind money and diamonds." A few guests nodded. Someone began to clap hesitantly, then stopped, unsure if it was appropriate. Charlotte stood there, trembling, realizing that her perfect image, the flawless bride, the admirate socialite, had collapsed before her eyes. "You've humiliated me," she whispered. "No," Ethan said quietly. "You did that to yourself the moment you treated a good woman like she was less than human." Charlotte's mother stepped forward, but her voice shook too. "Ethan, maybe we can fix this privately." "There's nothing left to fix," he replied, his tone final. "This isn't a scandal, Mistress Pierce. It's a revelation." Charlotte's face twisted between rage and regret. "You'll regret this, Ethan. You'll regret ever." Before she could finish, a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by a thunderclap, so loud it made the chandeliers tremble. Amara stepped closer to the center of the hall, her expression calm but firm. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't have to. Her voice carried all the weight of truth. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding," she said. "I came because my brother wanted to believe in you. But now, maybe he needed to see what real love isn't." Her words hung heavy in the air. Charlotte's lip curled. "Oh, don't act holy, you little," she began, the poison returning to her tone. But before she could unleash the slur forming on her tongue, Ethan slammed his hand on the table, his voice like thunder. "Don't you dare!" The entire hall went silent again, every breath, every heart waiting to see what would break next. The crash of thunder outside was nothing compared to the explosion inside the ballroom. The chandeliers rattled. The flowers on the tables quivered as if the whole room were holding its breath. Ethan's hand still rested on the table he'd slammed, and his voice thundered louder than the storm. I said, "Don't you dare, Charlotte." Charlotte froze. Her face drained of color, her mouth half open, but no sound came out. The guests stared, stunned, fascinated, uncomfortable. Even the band members at the corner had stopped pretending to tune their instruments. Ethan straightened slowly, his voice dropping into a deep, calm authority. "All night I stood here watching you, waiting for you to prove me wrong. I told myself you were just stressed, nervous. But the truth is, stress doesn't make people cruel. It reveals who they already are." Charlotte tried to interrupt Ethan. "Please, you don't understand." But he didn't let her finish. "No, Charlotte, I understand perfectly now." He gestured toward Amara, who stood motionless, dignified despite the humiliation. "That woman. The one you mocked, insulted, and almost called something unforgivable. She's my blood, my sister, and you treated her like trash." The hall buzzed with shocked whispers. Someone gasped audibly. Another guest muttered, "Lord, have mercy." Charlotte's voice trembled as she reached out. "Ethan, listen to me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was your—" He stepped back. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with decency." That silenced her completely. The rain outside intensified, slapping against the glass like applause from heaven itself. Ethan's chest heaved with years of buried pain and the weight of lost time, all pouring out in one moment. "When I told you about my childhood," he said, his voice cracking. "When I told you about growing up in foster care, you held my hand and said you admired me for rising above it. But what you really admired was the story, not the struggle. You wanted the fairy tale version of me, not the truth." Charlotte shook her head violently. "That's not true. I love you." Ethan's face softened with pity. "Not love. No, Charlotte, you love the idea of me, the polished, successful man who could make your life more glamorous. You never cared about the boy who once had nothing, or the sister he lost along the way." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, please." He shook his head. "When I saw how you treated Amara tonight, I realized something. If I hadn't told you who she was, you'd still see her as nothing more than the help. That's not love, Charlotte. That's arrogance dressed in lace." The guests murmured in agreement. A few clapped softly, not out of mockery, but out of respect. Even Mr. Dalton stood nodding solemnly. Charlotte's legs gave out beneath her, and she sank onto a chair, whispering through tears. "I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't mean any of it." Ethan looked at her one last time, pain flickering in his eyes. "Words can be forgiven, but the heart that spoke them, that's something only time and truth can fix." He took off his wedding ring and placed it gently on the table beside her, untouched champagne glass. "You were right about one thing," he said softly. "Tonight will be unforgettable, just not in the way you wanted." Gasps rippled through the hall again. Charlotte's hand trembled as she reached for the ring, but Ethan had already turned away. He walked over to Amara, who stood near the window, silent tears mixing with the rain reflected behind her. "Let's go, little sister," he said gently. "We've got nothing left to prove." As they turned to leave, Charlotte stumbled to her feet, crying out, "Ethan, don't walk away from me." But he didn't look back. Just as Ethan and Amara reached the grand doors, a sudden voice echoed through the hall. Pastor Raymond, the officiant, standing from his chair, his Bible in hand. "Wait," he said, his voice steady but full of sorrow. "Before you go, son, there's something everyone here needs to hear." The crowd turned toward him in silence. Even the storm seemed to pause. All eyes turned to Pastor Raymond, the officiant, who slowly stepped forward, his hand resting on his Bible. The air inside the ballroom grew still again, so still that the sound of rain tapping the glass felt deafening. Ethan stopped near the doorway, his back still to the crowd. Amara turned slightly, her expression wary but respectful. "Pastor," she said softly, "this isn't your burden to carry." But Pastor Raymond shook his head. "Oh, it is, child, because I've seen truth buried too long. And tonight, God wants it unearthed." Charlotte sank back into her seat, mascara running down her face, muttering to her mother, "Why won't he just stop?" Mistress Pierce's reply was a harsh whisper. "Because you started something you can't silence." The pastor turned to Ethan, his eyes filled with both grief and pride. "Son, when you came to me months ago, you said you wanted a wedding that honored honesty, not perfection. You told me you wanted to build your marriage on truth." He paused, looking between Ethan and Charlotte. "Well, truth has shown itself, just not in the way any of us expected." The audience stirred, some nodding quietly. Pastor Raymond continued, "Before I became a pastor, I worked with children in foster care. I saw many stories, some tragic, some miraculous, but there's one I never forgot." His voice trembled slightly as he turned toward Amara. "A little girl named Amara Johnson, who used to sing hymns in the hallway after lights out, whispering prayers for her lost brother." A quiet gasp spread through the room. Ethan looked up sharply. The pastor's eyes glistened. "I didn't know that brother would one day grow into the man standing before me tonight. The boy who used to wait at my church doorstep asking me to pray that he'd find his sister again." Ethan's breath caught. "You remember me?" The old pastor smiled sadly. "I never forget faces like yours. You told me once, if God ever lets me find her, I'll never let anyone hurt her again." The crowd murmured, many visibly moved. A few guests wiped their eyes. Amara's lips trembled. "You prayed with me once, too. I remember your voice." The pastor nodded. "And now I stand here watching that prayer fulfilled." He turned back to the crowd, his tone firm but heavy with compassion. "You see, tonight isn't about a ruined wedding. It's about revelation, a test of character and a reminder that wealth can buy weddings, but not worth. Status can open doors, but not hearts." Charlotte hid her face in her hands, trembling. Mistress Pierce sat stone-still, clutching her pearls, as if afraid they'd choke her. Ethan lowered his gaze, whispering, "I never meant to hurt anyone, Pastor. I just needed to know." "And now you do," the pastor said softly, "and so does everyone else." He looked at Charlotte. "Child, pride is a heavy thing. It blinds us to the humanity in others. But it's never too late to see, if you're willing to open your eyes." Charlotte lifted her face, tears streaming freely now. I don't know how to fix this." Ethan's voice was low but steady. "You start by admitting what you did was wrong." Every heartbeat in the hall seemed to echo against the marble floor, all eyes fixed on Ethan. The groom had just dismantled his own wedding with nothing more than truth. He stood still, drenched in the golden light of the chandeliers, rainwater still glistening on his suit. Amara watched him quietly from a few steps away, her expression unreadable, her presence calm, like a mirror reflecting his courage. Pastor Raymond's question still hung in the air. "Do you still want this wedding to happen, or do you walk away for good?" Ethan took a deep breath and slowly turned toward Charlotte. She looked smaller now, the confident, untouchable bride reduced to a trembling woman clutching her bouquet like it could somehow rewrite the night. Her eyes were swollen, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just lost control." He stepped closer, his expression softening but his tone firm. "Charlotte, you didn't lose control. You showed control over people you thought were beneath you. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." She swallowed hard, her tears falling freely now. "Please just give me another chance. I'll apologize to your sister, to everyone here. Ethan shook his head slowly. "Apologies can't fix what you never respected." The crowd murmured quietly, every word hitting like raindrops in still water. Amara stepped forward then, her voice steady and filled with compassion. "Charlotte," she said gently, "I don't hate you, but I do hope this moment teaches you something no apology could. You see, people will forget your dress, your flowers, your pictures, but they'll remember how you made them feel." Charlotte's lip trembled. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Amara nodded. "Then start living like you don't." For a brief moment, even Mistress Pierce couldn't speak. The arrogance that once colored her face had faded, replaced by shame. She reached for her daughter's hand, whispering, "You've got to let him go." Charlotte shook her head weakly, whispering back, "But I love him." Mistress Pierce sighed, eyes glistening. "Then love him enough to not hold him hostage." Ethan exhaled, his voice quieter now. "Charlotte, I don't hate you either. I just can't marry someone who doesn't see the world the way I do. You wanted a husband who did give you a picture-perfect life. I wanted a wife who'd stand beside me. In truth, we're not the same." He gently removed the boutonniere from his lapel and placed it on the table beside the wedding ring. He had already left, behind. The symbolism hit everyone. He wasn't leaving angry, just finished. Charlotte's sobs grew louder, her mother pulling her into an embrace. The guests looked on in stunned silence, some ashamed, others quietly inspired. Pastor Raymond closed his Bible slowly, his voice low but resonant. "And the truth, my friends, has been revealed, not to shame but to free." Amara wiped a tear that had finally escaped down her cheek. She turned to Ethan and whispered, "Let's go home." He nodded. Together they began walking toward the doors, hand in hand. The rain outside had softened to a gentle drizzle, as though the heavens themselves were sighing in relief. But before they reached the exit, Ethan stopped and turned back once more. He looked out over the hall full of people who had just witnessed a man trade pride for peace. "If anyone here learned something tonight," he said softly, "let it be this. Money can buy luxury, but it can't buy kindness. Titles can make you respected, but only character makes you remembered." A quiet, sincere applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling into something powerful. Charlotte hid her face, sobbing harder. Amara gave one final glance, not of triumph, but of forgiveness, before they stepped outside into the cool, cleansing night. As they walked down the steps beneath the falling rain, a black car pulled up to the curb. Mr. Dalton stepped out, holding an umbrella. "Ethan," he called softly, "before you go, I think you and your sister should hear what I've just learned about the Pierce's company, something that might make this story even more shocking." Amara froze. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Mr. Dalton's expression darkened. "Let's just say karma's already knocking on their door." The rain had eased into a fine mist, coating the pavement in a silver sheen, as Ethan, Amara, and Mr. Dalton stood outside the glowing entrance of Hillcrest Garden Estate. The once lively music from the ballroom had faded into faint echoes, replaced by the quiet hum of a night had changed everything. Ethan's brows furrowed. "What do you mean, Dalton? What's going on with the Pierce's company?" Mr. Dalton sighed, holding the umbrella steady over them. "You probably haven't checked the news, have you?" While we were inside, he pulled out his phone, the screen glowing against the rain. "Their family business, Pierce and Whitlock Holdings, just got exposed for major fraud. Front-page breaking story. The SEC's been investigating them for months." Amara's eyes widened. "You're serious?" Mr. Dalton nodded grimly. "Half the guests inside probably work with that company. They just don't know yet, but they will by morning." Ethan ran a hand down his face, disbelief mixing with irony. So while Charlotte was busy judging people's worth, her family was already collapsing. Mr. Dalton gave a short, bitter laugh. "Karma has a sense of timing, doesn't it?" Amara's voice was quiet, but heavy with compassion. "She's about to lose more than just a husband tonight." They stood there for a moment, the sound of distant thunder rolling softly above them. Finally, Ethan exhaled and said, "I didn't want this for her. I just wanted truth." Mr. Dalton looked at him steadily. "Sometimes truth brings its own storm, son, but don't mistake it for punishment. It's cleansing." Ethan nodded slowly. "You're right." Behind them, the heavy glass doors creaked open. A voice called out, broken and desperate, "Ethan, please." They turned. Charlotte stood in the doorway, her white gown now soaked and stained with wine, hair makeup smeared into shadows beneath her eyes. Without the spotlight and adoration, she looked small human. "Ethan," she said, stepping forward shakily, "I just heard about my father's company. Everything it's falling apart. We could fix this. You and I could—" He stopped her gently with a raised hand. "Charlotte, no, you need to fix yourself first." She blinked, shaking her head. "I can't do this without you." Amara stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "You can, but first you have to understand that your fall isn't about punishment. It's about awakening. The same world you look down on is the one that Anne's going to teach you humility." Charlotte stared at her, tears streaming. "Do you hate me?" Amara's expression softened. "No, hate doesn't heal anything, but forgiveness doesn't mean we forget." The bride's lip trembled, her shoulders shaking under the cold rain. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "Maybe not yet," Ethan said, "but grace doesn't wait for us to deserve it, it waits for us to change." Charlotte broke down, sinking to her knees on the wet pavement, sobbing. The white fabric of her gown clung to the ground, the symbol of her pride now washed in dirt and rainwater. Amara looked at her with quiet sorrow. "You'll rise again someday, just not the same." For a moment no one spoke. The rain whispered softly, cleansing the night of the bitterness that had filled it. Mr. Dalton finally broke the silence. "You two should go. There's nothing left for you here." Ethan nodded, wrapping his arm protectively around Amara. They turned toward the waiting car, but as the driver opened the door, Ethan paused and looked back one last time. Charlotte still knelt there, broken and weeping. Her mother crouched beside her, whispering something no one could hear. The grand hall behind them, once filled with luxury and laughter, now stood as a monument to pride undone. As Ethan and Amara stepped into the car, lightning flashed one final time across the night sky. Amara whispered, "Maybe the storm wasn't meant to destroy. Maybe it came to wash everything clean." Ethan turned to her, a faint, weary smile on his lips. "Then tomorrow," he said softly, "we start fresh." But Mr. Dalton's voice from the front seat cut through the calm. "You might want to see what's trending, Ethan," he said, handing him his phone. Ethan glanced at the screen and froze. The video of the entire confrontation had already gone viral. By morning, the internet had turned the Hillcrest Garden wedding into a global lesson. Clips of Charlotte's insults, Ethan's revelation, and Amara's calm dignity flooded every social platform. The headlines read things like, "Bride shames waitress, turns out she's Groom's sister." Others said, "Truth storms wedding, a lesson in kindness and karma." But while the world buzzed with opinions and outrage, inside the small, quiet chapel across town, Pastor Raymond stood before a handful of remaining guests, those who had stayed behind after the chaos, their hearts heavy with reflection. Ethan and Amara sat together on the front pew, their faces tired but peaceful. Charlotte was nowhere to be seen. Mistress Pierce had whisked her away after the collapse, likely to manage the growing scandal. The pastor cleared his throat, his eyes sweeping across the room. "Last night we all witnessed something raw, painful but necessary." No one spoke, even the air seemed to listen. He walked closer to the altar, resting his Bible there, the sound of the rain outside softer now, a whisper of cleansing. "We live in a world obsessed with appearances, with wealth, with status, with skin. But love," he said slowly, "doesn't bow to any of those things. Love is humble, it's kind, and when we lose sight of that, God has a way of reminding us, sometimes through storms." The audience shifted, tears glinting in more than one pair of eyes. He turned toward Ethan and Amara. "You both carried yourselves with grace. Ethan, you spoke truth with strength, and Amara," his voice softened, "you showed the kind of dignity that can't be taught in schools or bought with money. You showed the world that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stands tall." Amara lowered her gaze humbly. The pastor continued, "But let's not pretend the story ended last night. There's still a young woman out there, broken, ashamed, and probably learning the hardest lesson of her life. And maybe that's exactly what grace looks like too. Not comfort, but correction." Ethan nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to ruin her. I just couldn't keep pretending." Pastor Raymond smiled gently. Truth never ruins, son. It redeems and it frees those willing to see. He turned back to the guests, business partners, journalists, and strangers who had come to witness what would have been the wedding of the year but became something far more meaningful. You all saw what happens when pride stands taller than compassion, but if you walked away with judgment alone, then you missed the point. The pastor's voice grew stronger now, because every single one of us has a bit of Charlotte inside. Moments where we've looked down instead of lifting up, and every one of us can choose today to be a bit more like Amara, standing tall, speaking truth, and never returning hate with hate. A hush fell over the chapel. Ethan reached for his sister's hand and squeezed it gently. Amara's eyes filled with quiet tears, not of sadness but release. Mr. Dalton, siding behind them, whispered to himself, This is the message people need to hear." As the pastor closed his Bible, he said one final thing. Let this not be remembered as a ruined wedding, but as a redeemed gathering, because what was lost in pride was found again in truth. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly one guest began clapping, then another, until the whole room was filled with the soft rhythm of hands, meeting in solemn gratitude. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, pouring golden light through the chapel windows, bathing everyone in warmth. It felt like heaven's own applause. Ethan smiled faintly. Looks like even God saying amen. Amara chuckled softly. About time he showed up with the sunshine. The pastor grinned. Oh, he was there all along, right in the middle of the storm. As the congregation rose to leave, Amara's phone buzzed. She glanced down, hundreds of unread messages, and one unexpected text at the top. From Charlotte Pierce. I want to see you just once. No cameras, no press, please. Amara looked up at Ethan, uncertain. She wants to meet. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then let's find out why. The sun had barely risen above the Atlanta skyline when Amara and Ethan arrived at the quiet riverside cafe Charlotte had mentioned in her message. The world was still waking up. Soft orange light spilling across the water, birds cutting through the morning silence, the air heavy with the scent of rain and redemption. Ethan parked the car, hesitating. Are you sure about this? Amara gave a small nod. Sometimes the people who hurt the most need someone willing to see their pain instead of their pretend. He sighed but didn't argue. I'll be right outside if anything happens. Amara smiled. I know. She stepped out and walked toward the cafe patio where Charlotte Pierce sat alone at a corner table, clutching a cup of untouched coffee. The once glamorous bride was almost unrecognizable, her hair tied back loosely, hair eyes swollen from crying, her designer dress replaced by a simple gray sweater and jeans. When she saw Amara, she stood abruptly, unsure whether to speak or cry. You came, she whispered. Amara nodded gently. You asked, so I came. Charlotte sat back down, her voice breaking. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, Amara said softly. That's always a good place. Charlotte took a shaky breath. I didn't sleep last night. I kept seeing it, your face, Ethan's face. Everyone staring at me like I was a monster. And maybe I am. Amara shook her head slowly. No one's born that way, Charlotte, but life gives us chances to become better or worse. You just took the wrong path for a while. Charlotte's tears spilled again. You have no idea what it's like growing up in my world. Everything was about appearances. My mom said if I didn't marry well, I'd embarrass the family. I started believing love was a trophy you win, not something you earn. Amara listened quietly, her eyes soft but steady. And what do you believe now? Charlotte looked up at her with trembling lips. That I've been blind. That the people I thought were beneath me, where are the ones who had what I never did peace? Amara smiled faintly, though her heart ached for her. Peace isn't found in perfection, Charlotte. It's found in humility. Charlotte nodded, staring down at her coffee. The company, it's gone. The government froze everything. My father's reputation is ruined. Reporters camped outside our house all night. She let out a hollow laugh. I thought losing Ethan was the worst part, but now I see the real loss was becoming the kind of person I became. Amara reached across the table, placing a hand gently over hers. Then let this be your beginning, not your ending. Don't waste pain, let it teach you. Charlotte's shoulders shook as she whispered, I don't deserve forgiveness. Amara's voice was soft but firm. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, it's about release. I forgive you, Charlotte, not because you earned it, but because I refuse to carry bitterness that doesn't belong to me. Charlotte broke down, covering her face with her hands. For the first time she cried not from pride or shame, but from something deeper, cleansing sorrow. Amara stood, resting a hand on her shoulder. You can rise again, Charlotte. Just differently this time. Charlotte looked up at her, eyes red but sincere. If I ever get another chance to show the world who I am, I'll make sure they see someone better. Amara smiled. That's all any of us can do. As Amara walked back toward the car, Ethan stood by the door watching. How'd it go? Amara exhaled deeply. It wasn't about winning or losing, Ethan. It was about healing. He nodded, slipping an arm around her shoulder. You always were the stronger one. She smiled. No, brother, we both just survived different storms. They stood there for a while, watching the river move calmly beneath the morning light, the same light that had watched over their storm the night before. As they turned to leave, Amara's phone buzzed again. A news alert flashed on the screen. Pierce Family Foundation dissolved. Anonymous donor establishes Grace Rising Foundation to support foster children. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Anonymous donor. Amara smiled knowingly. I think we both know who. A soft wind drifted through the open windows of St. Mary's Memorial Garden, where the air smelled faintly of lilies and new beginnings. A week had passed since the wedding that never was, and life had quietly begun to rearrange itself. The scandal had settled. The lessons it left behind continued to echo across hearts and headlines alike. Ethan and Amara walked slowly down the cobblestone path, stopping before a small grave marked with a simple inscription. In loving memory of Mother Grace Johnson, faith never fails. They stood there in silence for a moment. The sound of leaves brushing against the wind was, like the whisper of her prayers, the same ones that had once covered two lost children, who were now finally found. Ethan knelt, placing a fresh bouquet of white roses at the base of the grave. We did it, Mom, he said softly. We found each other again, and we didn't let the world make us bitter. Amara smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. She'd be proud, you know. You faced truth with grace. That's not easy, in a world that rewards silence. Ethan exhaled, staring at the name on the stone. For years, I thought success would heal what we lost. But I learned something this week. Success without compassion just makes you rich in all the wrong ways. Amara nodded. And forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It sets you free. He looked at her, pride softening his eyes. You taught me that. They stood together for a while longer, watching as sunlight spilled over the gravesite. The world felt different now, lighter, like the storm had finally run its course. Then Ethan pulled out his phone. I want to show you something. Amara leaned closer as he scrolled through an email. It was from Mr. Dalton, a business proposal for a new non-profit foundation. The header read, The Grace Rising Foundation in honor of Amara and Ethan Johnson. Ethan smiled. It's official. The foundation's launching next month. We're going to provide scholarships, mentorship, and shelter for kids coming out of foster care. No child gets left behind this time. Tears welled in Amara's eyes as she hugged him. That's perfect. You turned pain into purpose. He held her close. We both did. As they pulled away, she glanced toward the horizon, where sunlight shimmered off the river in the distance. The Simich River, where she'd met Charlotte days earlier. Do you think she'll be okay? Ethan followed her gaze. I think she's finally learning, and sometimes that's enough. A small smile curved Amara's lips. Then maybe that's what grace really is. Not perfection, but progress. He nodded, thoughtful. Grace is giving people space to change even after they've hurt you. They began walking back toward the car, their steps slow, deliberate, peaceful. The chapel bell rang faintly in the distance, one clear, gentle note that felt like closure. As they reached the gate, Amara turned back one last time. "You know the storm wasn't punishment," she said softly. "It was protection." Ethan tilted his head. "Protection from what?" She smiled, her voice quiet but sure from living a lie. They walked off together, sunlight spilling ahead of them like a new path, one carved not by pain, but by purpose. Far behind them, on a nearby bench, a woman in a gray sweater watched them go. Charlotte Pierce sat silently, her face peaceful for the first time in years. In her hand, she held a donation receipt from Grace Rising Foundation. Her lips trembled into a whisper, only the wind could. "Here's. Thank you for forgiving me." The camera of life panned wide. The garden, the sunlight, the two siblings walking toward hope. The story that began with humiliation ended in redemption, the way all lessons from heaven do. In a world that measures worth by appearance, may we remember Amara's grace, Ethan's courage, and Charlotte's awakening. Because storms don't always come to destroy us. Sometimes they come to cleanse what was never meant to stay.